Hello and welcome to the Bandwagon Podcast, the show where we take a deep dive into the music industry. I'm your host Charlie Cooper and my guest this week is Dave Walker. Dave is a former garage DJ and pirate radio host. We talk about his early introduction to music, his time on the 90s garage scene, the incredible highs of playing to an engaged audience, the dangers and sometimes violent side effects of the UK garage scene, and the work that went into making it all happen. We also discuss Dave's current life as a podcaster and events organiser alongside EXWHU Employee with the West Ham Way. Dave, thanks for joining me. How you doing, mate?
Mate, I'm very well, Chaz. Very well. I'm looking forward to this, mate. Thanks for asking me on.
Thanks for coming along. Really been looking forward to having you along. You'll be on, this will be episode 5 or 6 by the time this goes out. So,
Wow.
yeah, I've had some very different people. I've had solo singers, I've had bands, I've had a guy who I've known really well who's a producer. So yeah, I'm trying to kind of really get across the spectrum of everybody on every level who does anything to do with or has had anything to do with the industry, you know. So yeah, it's great to have you here because, as I said to you earlier, you will be the first DJ I've had on here. So
Wow.
yeah, that's looking forward to that. So you mentioned before, you know, in previous conversations we've had about you kind of got into pirate radio and then transitioning into clubs, or whichever one come first. I'm not sure. How did that process work? Is it similar to if you're in a band and you're writing music and you send your slots off to your demos off to venues and to producers, or what's the process around that?
Well, firstly, I think it's probably over glamorizing me to call me a DJ. I mean, I used to enjoy a mix back in the day, and I thought it was going to go somewhere at some point, and we'll cover that. And I think you probably should have had me as episode 1, Chaz, because it's probably going to go downhill from here after the fantastic guest you're talking about. But
Sure it won't.
time will tell. But do you know what? I think like everyone that's been on this show, like yourself, like everyone listening, I loved music from an early age, and my family were very much soul based, so it was always Luther Vandross, Lionel Richie, Earth, Wind and Fire, Barry White, George Benson, those sort of people, and then it was like Motown, 60s, reggae, ska, and then there's a bit of the Jam and Madness and the Clash in late in life, but then I became absolutely obsessed with Prince. That was my go-to. That was the one artist at a certain age that really stood out to me, and he released an album called Purple Rain, and I think it's his most iconic album. But with that came the film. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the film was unbelievable, and the film used the soundtrack of Prince's album Purple Rain. And it's cringy thinking back, but I was that obsessed with him. I used to try and sort of mimic him, and I would be in my bedroom with a plastic guitar, and at the time I remember my wallpaper in my room had little dots all over it, and They were the heads of my crowd. So
That's amazing.
I'd be playing this music and pretending to be Prince. And it even got to a point where my mum took me to a shop. It was a Prince shop in London. It's not there anymore. And I look back now and I think this is quite disturbing. He was actually selling bottles of his sweat. Now, unbeknownst to me, it obviously wasn't his sweat.
Yeah,
Jesus
yeah.
Christ, he couldn't sweat that much. But being a kid, I thought it was. Now, why I was that mesmerised by getting a bottle of sweat over anything else, I don't know. Thankfully, Mum said no. Anyway, that little segment there tells you that I loved music and I appreciated good artists. And the next wave for me, I think, in teenage years was the garage industry, because the garage industry was such a massive movement, especially in Essex. And it was quite niche at the time. And it was our little thing. Like if you were into it, you knew all the songs. And then from that became pirate radio stations like Mission FM, where you would hear the likes of Heartless Crew on there in their early days, etc. And then you'd get exposed to events, eventually like Garage Nation. And then, you know, much like I did with Prince, in the DJ world, I fell in love with DJ EZ, like a lot of people do in the garage scene. And my love for garage music kind of transitioned into actually wanting to mix these records together like the likes of EZ did. So I bought some Sound Labs, which was like entry-level decks, if you like. And I just became absolutely obsessed. And do you know what, Chaz? At the time, I don't think I realised this, but looking back, my mum and dad split up when I was 3, even though kept a good relationship, but my dad wasn't at home. My brother had moved out at that time. So it was just me and my mum. And my mum has always kind of suffered with her mental health over the years. So she was always up and down. So looking back, I also think me obsessively mixing and spending hours in my room with these tunes, working out what could go with what and what would work, was a bit of escapism for me as well.
Yeah,
And
sure.
and without realizing, I was mastering my craft. And then it got to a point where me and my friend who was an MC thought, "Do you know what? I think we're good enough to maybe become pirate radio DJs and MCs." So what happened was, to answer your question after a long-winded answer, our stomping ground, if you like, for clubbing was Romford, always was in our teenage years. And we found out that to put a demo tape into what at the time was the biggest station in Essex, pirate radio station, was False FM. And to put your demo into them, you had to go into a record shop called Tracks in Romford. So that's what we did. We recorded a set. We walked in. There was no one there other than this big geezer standing next to me and the fella behind the counter. And I said, "Look, we're here to put in a demo tape for False FM. Can you make sure it gets there?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I'm not sure this is something he normally did. And looking back, he really put us on the spot, but he put it in. I think it was a CD back then, and he played it out loud. And he listened to the first few mixes and the tune selection and that, and he listened to Wes, my MC. And I noticed the big geezer next to me taking an interest. And as luck would have it, the stars aligned. He was one of the co-owners of False FM, but I didn't know. So he really liked it. And he said, "Boys, I quite like this." He said, "How do you fancy a slot on False FM?" So we said, "Yeah, he would bite your hand off for it." So the first ever set that we did was stereotypically in a tower block in Harold Hill. It was like a crack den when we walked in. It was a right shithole. Someone's nan's flat that died. I don't know if you've ever seen that program, People Just Do Nothing, but it's so accurate, that program. It's unbelievable. And I remember as I picked up the needle to place on the record, my hand was shaking like fuck. Like I did just about well enough to get the needle on the beginning of the track, and the first track played. And the rest is history for pirate radio. But that's how I started, basically, from the early years to getting onto pirate radio. And then we soon became prime time, and we stayed on prime time, which I think was 6 till 8 on a Saturday night for about 6 years. So we did well.
Wow. Yeah, fantastic. With the private radio stuff, that's something that's always really fascinated me, and of course, very different music. But one of my favorite music films has always been The Boat That Rocked, about the 60s pirate radio station.
Yeah.
And I always sort of, and always kind of had a real fascination with that. And sort of since the world of podcasting's come along and things like that, of course, the music side of it's a bit different from the rights. However, anyone with a voice can get out there and broadcast something, whereas it was so much more difficult up until recent years. What was can you tell me anything about the setup behind that? How people avoided kind of any issues from the broadcasting laws and that kind of thing?
Well, it was illegal,
Yeah.
first and foremost. So I don't know the legalities behind it and how they swerved it. I do know, looking back, that our two biggest fears we had was, one, rival pirate radio stations taking down our aerials. That was a real threat. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And you'd have to be fucking brave to do that. Well, I won't name them, but to the two fellas that ran False FM. But it happened. And of course, the other one, which we worried about more so, was police raids. And they happened a few times as well when I was on the station. Thankfully, never when I was doing my set. Because the biggest fear for a DJ, if you get a police raid, you don't get arrested for having anything to do with the station. They go after the fellas that run it. But what they do is they confiscate your records. And for a DJ at the time, that's like taking your heart away. It's like someone walking into one of your gigs, Chaz, and taking your guitar.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's what we worried about. So they were the two biggest threats to being on air. As for actually being on air and the technicalities of it, I'm not too sure, if I'm honest. I think these days it's more digital, and I think these days actually it's legal. But in those days, it was it was your traditional radio signal set up, and when the area was up, so were we. It was as simple as that, really. We just had to keep the rivals away and the old bill.
I see. He's just fascinating. You sort of reminded me then what you said about the gear getting confiscated. One of my uncles, he used to do house DJing at raves and things like that, or warehouse raves and old barn raves and things like that. And there was always a thing where he would be like, "Well, I'm not headlining because I don't want to take my own gear. I want to use someone else's gear in case it gets raided, basically.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%. That's what it was like in those days. And, for a lot of DJs as well, certainly in my circle, we were working class. We didn't have much money. So the initial outlay either came from saving up for an incredibly long time or a birthday present or a Christmas present. So this carried real monetary value. It wasn't a case of if you lost an expensive bit of kit, you can go out the next day and buy another one. This was your heartbeat, really. And, for me, when I eventually moved on from Sound Labs, I wanted the holy grail of decks at the time, probably still are, Technic 1210s. Beautiful set of decks. And I remember at the time they were £1,000, which was a lot of money. And I called my dad. And looking back, it was quite a good life lesson, to be fair. And I called him at the beginning of the 6 weeks holidays. And I said, Dad, is there any chance, because I want to start taking this seriously now, that you could buy me some Technic 1210s? I said, they're about £1,000. I know where you can get them from. I've done all the research. I'd really appreciate it. Even if we call it an early birthday or Christmas present, I really want these and I'm ready for them. And he said, yeah, I'll get them for you. And I said, oh, Dad, that's fantastic. I said, thank you so much. And then he said, but you're going to have to work for them. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I've got a job for you in a warehouse in Childerditch off the A127. We need a bit of labouring done for 6 weeks. He said, you do that, I'll give you the £1,000 to get your decks. So, of course, because I wanted the decks that badly, that's what I did. I sacrificed all of my 6 weeks holidays to get those decks, which was a nightmare, and I hated every minute of it. But in comparison to the feeling of walking into that DJ shop and my dad handing that money over and us coming away with 1210s, mate, it just doesn't compare.
No, you're right. And you're bang on about this kind of thing. I think particularly is for young people, it's so good to the feeling you get from going out and grafting and getting something and earning for it. I'm sure you're the same as I was. My parents both worked long hours, particularly my dad did shift work, that kind of thing, and it installs a bit of an ethic in you. And then I when I was at school, I had a cleaning round at the school for an hour a day after school, and during the summer holidays, I'd go into my dad's garage, pinch a wheelbarrow and sponges and whatever I could get, and go doing washing cars, and that's how I kind of paid for strings. And if I wanted a new guitar, that kind of very, very, very similar to your situation, And I think that's the thing for when it's something you love doing, particularly when it's something I think artistic or creative or sport wise. So you want a new pair of football boots, something like that. You do work for it. You absolutely do.
Yeah, you're right. And do you know what, Chaz? I'm probably going to take us off topic a little bit here, but this is probably the one regret I've got as a dad. I like to think I'm a good dad, but this is my one regret, is that I didn't instill that into my kids from an early age, because it's a bit of a vicious circle. If you grew up having nothing, you remember the feeling of the disappointment and the desperation and the need for more than what you had. And then when you become a dad, I'm speaking for myself, but probably a lot of other people as well, you desperately want to make sure your kids never felt how you felt. And I think that's a bit of an issue, because now, I mean, they are grateful, don't get me wrong, but they do pretty much get everything they want. And the one thing that we did have working for what we had was a good grounding, and it kept us humble and it made us more appreciative. Now, when the kids get something, they are appreciative, but it's probably for about 10 minutes and they just accept the fact that they've got it. So sure. I go back to saying it was a good life lesson, and one that I think really I should have done more so with my kids, really.
Yeah, I think it is important. I can remember hearing things like, for example, I think it was the Beckhams. They had their kids get a job in a cafe near where they lived in Spain, and that kind of thing. And there was no need for them to have done that from a financial perspective. But it was like you say, it was good grounding, and I think that I think it's definitely helpful. It's definitely helpful. But also, from what you said there, Dave, is you've recognised something that you would have wanted in your childhood, and you've given it to your kids, which is also great.
Yeah. Failed miserably in terms of giving them that appreciation, but I mean, I'm being a bit harsh. They do appreciate everything they've got, because I make sure they do. But I think we live in a society now where kids especially have life too easy, because for example, back in our day, Chaz, or back in my day certainly, if you wanted to watch a film, you'd have to ask your mum or dad for a few quid to go down to Blockbusters, then you'd spend about 2 hours picking a film. Where it was now, it's on demand with Netflix.
It's just the instant gratification culture, isn't it, that we've got?
It is, yeah. It encourages self-entitlement, if anything, because every kid now has what they want when they want it. And it was just different in our day, really,
Yeah, absolutely. With things like, next day delivery on Prime, you know, and I can
Yes.
feel it even affecting me. If I order something on Prime and it's not here 3 days later, I've got the right ump.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Like, so
yeah. It's
I
true.
can
It's
even
the
recognise it in
culture.
myself, you know,
Yeah,
and it's. I mean, partly that's because I advertise you pay for next day delivery, and I think that's just a different issue altogether.
yeah,
But you know, I think
yeah.
it's still a point to be made, and I think you know there is a lot of that, and it's like being doing what I do with the schools. You know, you hear some of the things these kids have got. I remember hearing a story about there's a kid in sixth form at a private school in Kent, and this somebody I knew who worked at this school told me they had like it was like a brand it was a brand new car. It was an Audi. It weren't like an R8. It was like an A1, but still fucking hell, brand new Audi is your first car at 17. Don't matter what it
Yeah,
is, does it? A brand new car, any description. And
yeah.
he wrote it off, not looking where he's going. And you know, there was another. He had another one 2 weeks later that was
Do
ordered
you know
for him.
what? I mean, I know I'm throwing so many different topics in that's probably absolutely destroying your show and the theme of it. But going back to cars, I'm not a car person at all. But I bought my first ever car for a pint, and it was a Nissan
Really?
Micra. And I always said it was ahead of its time because the grooves of the key for the ignition was so worn out that if you take a roundabout, the keys would fall out the ignition, but the engine would still keep fucking running. So I always said it was ahead of its time for keyless ignition. Do you know what? I think I sold that car for 50 quid, so I made a handsome profit as well.
Oh, nice, nice. They were keyless ignition for years in Crawley. They're just people, you know what I mean? They
It's
just get a
called hot
coat hanger through
wiring,
the
isn't
window.
it?
Exactly, coat hanger through the window, and off they go. So,
Oh, brilliant.
how did the pirate radio transition into playing in clubs or at raves or wherever you did live sets really?
Well, it started from False FM, definitely. But it was incentivized as well, which was the one thing that I was never really comfortable with. So on the station, whether you were prime time or whether you had the graveyard slot, it really almost depended on how many friends you had, because False would give you a handful of tickets. So let's say, for example, they rented out Secrets in Romford. They would give each DJ a handful of tickets, and whoever sold the most amount of tickets downwards would be the priority in which set you would play at what time. Well, I can kind of understand that, to be honest with you, but it just wasn't something I was overly comfortable with. But we were recognised as one of the best acts on the station, if you like. So, you know, we started getting gigs, and it was always Romford because we were an Essex-based station. We had quite a big pull in Romford, so we would find ourselves doing Secrets, RM1, Pacific Edge, Hollywoods, Time and Envy, and I just loved it. Again, I was really nervous, but you take that nervous energy and it turns into adrenaline when you drop a track that just everyone loves and people are shaking your hand and you're playing music you love and people love it as well. And like I say, I honestly, I genuinely believe to this day that garage, especially back then, was such a special, unique genre of music that it just brought everyone together. And yeah, and then from there, I started to get recognised by a few promoters. So I would get booked to do faces in Ganseal, which was really good. And I remember this. I remember this one time. I look back now. I can't believe I had the front to do this. It's quite incredible, really. And I think back and I wince. But I had this one promoter call me up. Caroline, her name was, lovely woman, and she said, "We'd love to book you for 195 Epping, just for an hour slot. And if you could do a club classic set, that'd be perfect because that's the sort of crowd that would be attracting." I said, "Yeah, no, not a problem at all." Well, shortly before this, I don't know how I thought I was ever going to go anywhere with this, but I bought a bongo set. Right, just a set of bongos, just two bongos. And I
I'm
used to
so
piss
glad you
about on
brought
them.
this up because I was going to ask you about this.
Well, honestly, mate, I just can't believe I did it. I couldn't play the bongos. I had them a little while. I couldn't play them. I could probably put one rhythm together. In fact, I did one rhythm that I knew, and that was it. Like limited beyond belief. You know, anyone listening to this that's never touched a bongo in their life, I could put bongos in front of you now, and you'd be able to play it as well as I did then, right? But I don't know what I was thinking. I said to the promoter, "Okay, yeah, I'll do that hour for £100. That's fine. But just to let you know, I also play the bongos. So if you want, I can play the bongos live over my set at the same time if you give me 200 quid." And she did it as well. And I turned up with these bongos. I put a mic over them and it was busy as well. I don't know, Chow. I would never do it now. I don't know what I was thinking back then. Whether I was stupid, deluded, overconfident, I don't know. But I was playing my set and I can mix quite quickly anyway. So get the mix in and then I would just do this rhythm on the bongo, but it would be the same rhythm over and over again. I still remember it now. It probably haunts everyone to this day from those that were at 195 that night. It would just go, ba-da-bum, bum, bum, ba-da-ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-bum, bum, bum, ba-da-ba-dum, ba-dum. That's it. Over and over and over again. And needless to say, I was never booked again by that promoter anyway. And then I started to venture out a little bit and there was there was a night, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Hammersmith Palais or Wandsworth Palais. One of them is a theatre, and it wasn't that one. I think it might have been Wandsworth Palais. And I remember this venue was massive, and it was a good lineup that night. And this is someone booking me independently, so it was nothing to do with False FM. And I got there and I thought, Jesus Christ. And I was on my own as well, didn't have my MC with me. There's a lot of people here. And I think from memory, it might have even been someone like So Solid Crew that were heading it up. And
Oh, wow.
I had a half decent set actually in the warm up. But the one thing that stood out to me, the I made it moment in my mind at the time, was when I walked in, some of the DJs were doing their warm up sets and that, and projected in lights above their head, massive, like 10-foot lettering, was their DJ name behind them on the wall. And I was like, oh my God, this is the bollocks. And talking of wincing and cringing, for some unknown reason, I couldn't even tell you why, Chaz, my DJ name from day one was DJ Pulse, right?
Okay.
It's fucking cringy as you like, awful. But it stayed with me. I never changed it again for some reason. I don't know why. So before everyone went on, they told the light projector person who had a computer wired up to the lights, what's your DJ name? I told him and everyone else did. And everyone before me, lights are up and all that. And then it was my turn to go on, shaking like a leaf, but the adrenaline going. And I knew the set I had planned was going to go down really well, unless I hoped it would anyway. And then the tunes have started. I'm 2 tunes in. I thought, I've got to have a look behind me because this is unreal. And then I've turned round. I couldn't believe it. My name was up in lights, but fucking spelt wrong. They'd put up DJ Plus.
Oh,
So
for fuck's sake.
if that wasn't an omen for how my career in DJing was going to go, I don't know. So I was so fucking dejected by that because I wanted to, I wanted to remember that moment as this is the bollocks moment. It was a good night, but he had one job, that geezer, and he fucked that right up. So I wasn't too happy. And then I think that the furthest I went probably was when I started to go into London, and I'd done a few bits and pieces in London. And the one that stood out for me was there used to be a club in London with a swimming pool in the middle of it called the EXWHU Club. And I think from memory, and I could have this wrong, I think it closed down because I think either someone drowned in it or there was some difficulties around health and safety.
Jesus, can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine a swimming pool in a nightclub being a problem at all, can you?
It's got disaster written all over it, and especially with drugs being as rife as it was and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, whoever thought that was a good idea, I don't know. By all accounts, had some great nights there, but I think it was inevitably always going to come to an end. Anyway, this club had a sister bar called the EXWHU Bar. So you had the EXWHU Club and the EXWHU Bar, and again, I was booked there to go on my own, and it was heaving this night, and I had a really good set time, and. And do you know what? You know, sometimes whether it's sixth sense or whether you could just pick up on an atmosphere, it's a good crowd, but you can just almost sense that something ain't right. There's a bit of hostility in the air. Well, I mean, bloody hell, Chaz, you played enough pubs to know exactly how I'm feeling at this time. And I just felt like something was going to kick off. Anyway, it didn't until I've come on. And again, I'm really looking forward. I've got this pumping set with these tunes that I know are going to get everyone going. So I played the first one, and we're about 15 seconds in. And someone has bumped the decks because I'm not on a stage. I'm ground level with everyone else. So someone's sort of been pushed into the decks or whatever. The needle's gone flying off like that classic noise. And then it's just all going off. There's like a massive brawl between what felt like about 30 of them. I'm like, fucking hell. And I remember there was a couple of girls that were petrified. And I sort of brought them into the corner with me, which meant I was about 8 foot away from this geezer I could see near the bar. And he was something to do with this. And I remember, I'll never forget it, I saw someone break a glass and stick it down the side of his face and drag it all along his face. And his ear, I saw his ear hanging off. It was hanging off by the lobe. And the impact of that glass going into his face, there were drops that hit my shirt from about 8 foot away. That's how much the release was of blood. And like I say, his ear was hanging off. So that's the sort of darker side of a night behind the decks. But yeah, listen, I've had a good run at it. The pirate days were great. Moved from False to Vision FM. Then I moved from Vision to Shine FM, which is probably the most famous pirate radio out of the three that I've been on. And I remember that was in Bow. That was in a shipping container in Bow. That one, because everything is incognito in the pirate radio world. And I remember I borrowed my wife's car to get there one Saturday, and I was doing an old school garage set. And I must have parked in the wrong place. In fact, I did. I parked behind a barrier when I should have parked in front of it, or whatever. And I've come out, and it turns out that the fella that runs the yard, he's got this fucking forklift truck, and he's put the sticks under my wife's car, lifted it up, and put it the other side of the barrier. There was countless amount of damage done to the bottom of the fucking car. I couldn't believe it.
In hell.
Yeah. And then it wasn't long after that, I actually had a Saturday off. And when I had a Saturday off, I really liked it. So I had the next Saturday off and then the next Saturday off. And then I thought, you know what? I think I'm done. I've had a good run at it. I've had some unbelievable club nights, unbelievable pirate radio stints. I'm enjoying life too much without it now. And do you know what's funny? You speak to any DJ, they probably won't understand this, how I was so cold about it. But I remember after I'd packed it in, I sold my decks and I sold my records. And when you're doing it, these things are like your children. But I just felt empty when I sold them. I didn't really feel anything, which DJs to this day can't understand. But that, for me, epitomised how I felt at the time and how ready I was to move on to my next venture,
I mean, you certainly had a time of it. Christ, I mean, in the time you did do it, you have got
great times.
Yeah, great times. You've got more. You got a lot more. What should we say? Events. Core memories coming out of that, and probably a lot of people who did it for even longer than you did. That situation you just said there in Aqua Club. Fucking hell, I can't imagine. I've had it kick off when I've been playing before. Other people pissed up and go. It's usually just handbags. It's never comes to anything particularly nasty. But that's terrible.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember one time, I think it was my girlfriend at the time's friend's birthday. And as a favour, she asked me if I could DJ there. And it was, ironically, it was at the Brentwood Centre. And for those that are listening that don't know, I'm sure you don't, now I'm a West Ham podcaster. That's what I do. And we started off at Phoenix FM radio station. And adjacent to that, literally shares the same bricks, was the Brentwood Centre.
Oh, and really?
Yeah, they share the same bricks, literally next door. And this is where, all these years ago, I'd played this gig for my girlfriend's mate. And to be fair, it was fucking mobbed. There was so many people there. I didn't know 90% of people there. I brought a good group of pals with me. And one of my mates innocently started chatting up this bird. And it turns out this bird was seeing someone else from another crowd who was there. And I don't know if it was egos or some sort of like plastic gang culture, but this fella called his mates who knew of sort of some badder boys, if you like, that skidded up in a XR3 and they all jumped out, and that was pandemonium as well. That was just after my set, but that was bad because one of my mates, because they brought knives as well, this lot, and one of my mates got slashed up badly. They didn't stab him, but they slashed the shit out of him all over his body, his neck, his face. And then they chased my mate through the streets of Brentwood, my best mate, who luckily enough climbed over someone's fence, but they chased him with a knife down an alleyway. I don't know how that could have gone for him if he wasn't as quick as he was.
Nice,
so that was pandemonium as well. So it's been good times and bad, but I wouldn't change any of it. It's been brilliant. I look back with fond memories. And do you know what? One of my fondest memories, actually, skipping right back, is one of the best jobs I've ever had. And I don't know if people remember this place, but in Gants Hill, there was a place called the Record Box. And that's where I used to get all my records, and people from around the area will know it well. And I got good friends with Gary Williams, who owned it. It's not there anymore. It's closed down. I think it's a fireworks shop or something in Gants Hill, just literally opposite faces. And we got on so well that he wanted to start having a day off a week. So he let me run the whole shop by myself every Wednesday for 50 quid.
Oh, nice.
But it's the best job in the world because you've got decks in front of you, all of the latest releases behind you. So I was just mixing all day for 50 quid. And then I'd get to speak to people, recommend the latest bits and pieces, would speak to DJs and MCs that were coming in, promoters, vinyl sellers. And it was brilliant. So yeah, collectively, mate, it was great. Great days, genuinely.
Have you ever been tempted to go back and do like a one-off, like sort of 90s theme club nights or anything like that?
No, I haven't, Chaz. I mean, one thing about my personality, I think, looking back at myself, is that when I feel like I'm done with something, I genuinely am done. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the case with the pirate radios and the club nights. I mean, during COVID, I got some Pioneers, just like 500 quid pair with some decent speakers, and I put up a few mixes that are on Mixcloud now. So it's Dave Walker WHU, and I did Garage Bangers Volume 1 and 2. Make it sound really professional. Like it's ready for commercial release. Garage Bangers 1 and 2, Club Classics, that's a really good one to listen to. And I've done a hip hop and R&B one just for my own benefit. Really, and just so I can go back to it and listen to it, and when the sun's out, stick it on because it's the sort of stuff I like.
Nice.
Um, but outside of that and the bedroom DJing stuff, which even that I don't do anymore really, then no, I don't, Chaz, to be honest with you. It's sort of a bit of a thing of the past now.
No, fair enough. You'll laugh at this though. I just figured out why I couldn't find your mixes. Because I was
Yeah,
looking on
go on.
SoundCloud, not
Oh,
Mixcloud.
yeah. Yeah, that'll be the reason. That'll be the reason. Mixcloud's the one you want.
On the entirely wrong website. Okay. Well
Do you
done,
know what?
Chaz. Okay.
You know what? I will say to anyone that will look that up, and if you're going to look it up, if you're not into garage, don't bother with the garage stuff. If you're not into hip hop and R&B, don't bother with that. But the Club Classics one I did, I think anyone will enjoy that. That's really good
Fantastic.
days. Yeah,
No, I'm definitely into R&B and hip hop and the club classic stuff I do quite like as well. So I'll definitely have a look at them. And I know quite a few people who are or were and still are very into garage as well. So I
brilliant.
can definitely share that about. So with what's I guess now sort of we've covered that. I'm guessing with what you do now. Now I've been a fellow of yours since 2016 when you
Wow.
first started the West Ham Way radio show on Phoenix FM with
Yeah.
X and Kev, and followed you through since you had your. I mean, I'll let you tell the story. Your well, shall we say explosive exit from Phoenix?
Oh, God Almighty. Yeah.
So how I'm sure we'll come on to that. So with what you did on Park Radio, I'm sure that, in a way, while stepping a gap, that's probably the perfect grounding for you to then go and be a presenter on a radio show, wasn't it?
Well, it was. Oh, yeah. No, you're right. That's actually what I was going to say. And I realised you just said it. It was. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. And there might be a lot of non-football fans and West Ham fans that listen to this. Our first ever show on Phoenix FM, talk about throw you in at the deep end, was with a guest called Sir Trevor Brooking, who is
In hell.
probably beyond a legend at West Ham, really more of an icon, I'd say. Like
He's got a
he's
stand named after him just to make
exactly,
make
yeah.
people aware.
He's royalty for those that don't know. Lovely old fella as well, and that was our first one. And despite the confidence I had, we were all a little bit like a fish out of water because it was a new topic to discuss, new surroundings. We were still getting to know each other really at that time. So I was really, really nervous. I think we all were. I think if you listen to that first ever episode in those days, it probably comes across how nervous we were. But you're right. You're absolutely right. On pirate radio, I used to talk and I used to deal with buttons at the same time and mixing desks and stuff like that. So really, that was I suppose the primary school to then put you onto secondary school,
Sure.
if you like. And Phoenix FM was the secondary school. And again, I wouldn't have changed a day of that. And I think really the biggest test of those times, and I'm pleased we had this test, was that it was live radio back then. So you couldn't take back anything you said. If someone was listening live, then what you said was taken as gospel. And if, even these days, we do it as a podcast now, it's pre-recorded and I edit the shows. So you can take out anything that, you think might offend people or something you shouldn't have said. You couldn't do it in those days with live radio. It was taken as gospel. So that was a good grounding as well. But it was also part of our eventual demise because what happened, and I'll tell the story briefly, is I'll be forever grateful, as will X, to Phoenix for giving us the opportunity to come on and talk about West Ham every week for, I think, probably a few years we did it. But the station was a shithole, really. I mean...
What, that's that crack then that you started in?
No, yeah. What do you know? It felt up there at times, Chaz. It felt up there because it's silly little things like you walk in, there'll be no toilet paper in the toilet, or even worse, one of the microphones wouldn't be working, and it's like going into a baker's and they don't do cakes. This is their bread and butter, and they earn money from this station through sponsorships. And we were bringing good guests. Actually, we were starting to bring really good guests to the radio station. They wasn't. They said they would, but after Trevor Brooking, I don't think they brought anyone in. So we were, I think, very important to them in terms of their listenership, etc. But there would be moments where there won't be enough chairs there for the guests. So then me and X would pretty much have to stand next to each other like the Proclaimers, fucking interviewing the next person that was coming in. It was embarrassing. So it caused an issue. It caused resentment in me over a period of time. And then my side of the issue, from his perspective, was that, by nature, I'm not proud of it. I am a swearer. It is part of my makeup. It's part of how I communicate. And I did do, I think, a relatively good job at not doing that on the station over a period of time. But then the odd word did come out. Now, anyone listening to this show that's been on radio might know, if you do swear, as long as you apologise, then Ofcom won't have an issue with it. And it has to be a sincere apology as well. This is part of the problem that I'm going to come on to. So, so I had resentment in me because of the conditions we were working in. And it's not me being a diva. It's genuinely like bad stuff that shouldn't be happening in a radio show. And the producer at Phoenix had some issues around, some of the swearing and all this kind of stuff, the amount of apologies we had to make for live radio. And then he's become a bit of a personality now. But at the time, I think he had about 5,000 followers and not a lot of people knew he was. He was fresh off The Apprentice. Tom Skinner came into the show. He's a West Ham.
I remember this episode so well because he brought a bottle of Jack Daniels with him, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did. He did. So he had his mate with him, Alex Hookins, who's a really good lad. But this episode really proved to be the nail in the coffin because Tom and Alex came on and there was us recording with him. And it was a live show, which really was our biggest mistake. And there were quite a few swear words. And it got to a point where the first couple I apologised for. And I think the problem with this one is that I kind of got the giggles a little bit. And on the third swear word, I think I chuckled when I apologised, which isn't deemed as sincere. So that got the station a fine of, I think it was about 10 or 15 grand. It was big for a community base. Yeah, Ofcom don't fuck about, mate. If you're out of their guidelines and you offend someone or they complain and you're banged to rights once they've heard it, then yeah, they can put out heavy fines. And for a community-based radio station, that was a kick in the nuts. So that ultimately led to an argument between us saying, well, you can have a go at us, but your conditions are shit, and I can't believe the mics ain't working. Can't believe you ain't got enough chair. You ain't even got toilet roll in the toilet. And then he was saying, well, you've killed us financially by doing this and saying that and not being professional. So we had an argument, and then we went our way. We went home and he went home. And then before I knew it, he'd put an announcement on Twitter without telling us saying, thank you for the years of service that the West Ham way have given us, but with immediate effect, they're no longer part of the station.
It's bang out of order. I remember that so well as well.
Yeah. And do you know what, mate? At that time, before we went on to Patreon, which is a subscription-based service, it was an open book, the podcast. So we had tens of thousands of listeners all around the world. And when I think I replied to him saying something like, it's the first I've heard of it. I suggest you rethink this because a lot of people like this show and they look forward to it every week. On the back of that reply, it was pandemonium, Chaz. I've never seen anything like it. People were doing their bollocks, they were. And it was funny, right? Because I look back, I got a message from the producer of Phoenix and he said, Dave, this is getting out of hand now. I'm now starting to get death threats about this situation. If you don't do something about it, then I'm going to get the police involved. And I stopped and thought for a second. I thought, do you know what? I'm not saying he's a nasty man. I'm not. But I had a gut feeling that when we walked away from the station, all of our archive shows he would keep and not release. So I said, like I'm fucking Tony Soprano, I said to Paul, all right, Paul, I'll call it off. But I want you to give me a copy of every single show we've ever done so that I can put it in our archives for wherever we go moving forward. So I've got that history. So he agreed to it. And then things did calm down. And then my partner at the time, and still ex, he said, yeah, it's all well and good, Dave, but we're fucked. We've worked all these years to, get a following and be well established as a radio show. We haven't got a radio station anymore. What are we going to do? And I said, you know what, X? I said, this could be a blessing in disguise, this, because now we haven't got to answer to anyone but ourselves. We could be our own bosses, put out what we want when we want. I said, I'm going to go away now for the next week and study religiously the software programs that we need to record, the software programs we need to edit. I'll look at platforms where we can publish it, and I'll become the producer and the editor and the host, and then we'll just carry on as usual. And for a week solidly, I locked myself away. Far from an expert, by the way, to this day, but accomplished in terms of being able to edit and publish and release a show. And I did it, and then before you knew it, we were on our own, and I think we went on Anchor, which I wouldn't recommend because they do keep your historic shows if ever you leave. So try and swerve them if you want to put content on there. And then I think we went to Audio Boom, where we started to proactively on their side get sponsorship opportunities. So we was nicking a few quid here and there, but it was a solid platform to put your music on. And then boom, the light bulb moment dropped, and it was circumstantial personally for both me and X as to why we did this. But we said, look, we've worked all these years now. We've got a big listenership. Let's not just put out the same podcast every week that we've always done and now say, right, it's a $5 a month. Let's put out the same podcast, but put 4 other shows out, exclusive news, ticket giveaways, quizzes, virtual events, all this sort of stuff, like a one-stop shop for West Ham fans for a $5 a month, and see if we can make a living out of it. And then we did it. We made the announcement on Twitter. Ultimately, I don't like this term, but the show was going behind a paywall, but so was so much other content we was going to be doing. Mm-hmm. I'd say 70% of the feedback was brilliant and supported it. 30% absolutely caned us. But when we announced it and we put the link for Patreon on, it was just like boom, 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 another subscriber, another subscriber, another subscriber. All these different fivers that were coming in. And it got to a point eventually after about a year where we both said, look, if we didn't do our full-time jobs, we could put even more into this and take this even further. And that's what we did. We quit our jobs. And now this is what we do for a living, full-time, talk about West Ham, amongst other things.
And what a move that was, because I remember like that whole scenario you've been through. I was one of the flies on the wall on Twitter, watching the whole thing unfold. And admittedly, to be honest with you, I probably stuck the boot in on Phoenix as well. I don't normally get the ump. Yeah. I rarely tweet full stop, but I do seem to remember putting a few choice words on that thread, to be completely honest, which is quite unlike me. As far as the death threats go, I'm sure I put you in that position where you had to have that chat with him. But
I should be thanking you, mate, to be honest, because we've got our shows.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. For anyone listening who is one of those sort of Twitter people, that was a joke. Just to make that clear.
Little disclaimer, wise.
and that I can remember when you went to Patreon. I've got a group chat with my dad and my brother that's just basically just football, and I think I screenshotted the tweet, popped it in there, and was like, and our general thoughts, thank fuck for that. Like it's gonna have longevity, because it was a bit of you were releasing stuff, but I guess you were quite clear you didn't know exactly how the future was going to look, that you were going to keep doing it, but you weren't sure exactly how. And it gave that for your followers, it gave that certainty of what to expect, and the quality just exploded. The amount of content that you were doing, the extra time guests, it gave. I guess what it did was give you the freedom to really make it as big and as good as it could be.
Well, I think, Chaz, you'll relate to this, and anyone, whether you're a music artist, when this show is predominantly about music, so I'm sure anyone listening to this will be able to relate. The one thing in life that is so liberating is having creative freedom. And that is what this new platform gave us, because when we was at Phoenix, we got told to do a radio show for an hour and it's going to be live, and that's it. You go home. But now we could be as creative as we wanted to be. And what I think we did was we created a platform and a service that we would want as West Ham fans. And a bit like music artists, I'm sure, and I'm not one, fuck me, I'd struggle to play the triangle, but people like yourself and anyone listening to this show, I'm sure you probably create music and play music how you would want to hear it, which is the enjoyable side of what you do, but also gives you the belief that if you enjoy it, then other people will. And I think that really is the concept of Patreon. We brought like Sam Delaney on because he's got a great history of broadcasting, and he's funny and he talks good game and he offers an alternative view. We do the Extra Time show because we knew that people would love to hear from ex-players, what they're up to now, telling stories of their days of years gone by. Mad Dog, mad as a box of frogs. And people love listening to him, and we would have loved listening to him, still do. We brought the American boys on from an American perspective, and we've got columns and pre-match analysis and where are they nows and a lot of little features and like I say, the giveaways and the quizzes, and there's so much to it that I think is a symbol of how obsessed me and X became with giving patrons value for money. We've always been obsessed with it, and we always will be. We want people to say, if anything, you do too much, which I think we probably do, but it doesn't stop us doing it.
No, I agree.
Because that gives you the longevity then. If people are happy, then we're happy. And that's it, really.
And what I've always found incredible, particularly since you went to Patreon, because that sort of 30% of people were saying it was gonna. One of the things I saw people from a negative saying it was gonna alienate people. It's done the total opposite. It's given you the opportunity and the facility to be so much more engaged with your following. I don't know any group of media who has the relationship with their followers that UNX have. I don't know anyone else who does it. Like, even to a point where from myself being a listener, I got in touch with X, said, look, I play music. I'd love to play at your events. Is that something we can do? And you were both kind enough to have me along for that. And the events are absolutely brilliant. They're there. That's another thing I'll come on to later from more of a, I guess, sort of music point of view and an events organisation point of view. Is there any formula, for want of a much better expression, that you have for keeping in touch with people? I know you've obviously the phone-in show, which is of a great help, but there are people who listen to you who have gotten to know you both, like on a personal level, and you've got so many people like that. How do you manage that?
I think it's very simple, Chaz. I think it's down to the fact that we are incredibly humble as people. I think we're incredibly down to earth. We don't have an ego. And I'm not for 1 second suggesting that we should, by the way. I think a lot of people put us on a pedestal that we don't deserve. Certainly speaking for myself, I think X is on a different level in terms of what he's achieved from the ITK stuff. But collectively, with the West Ham way, people put us on a pedestal. And people do want to talk to us. Because the one thing as well, Chaz, is that, people like yourself, and I'm sure you can especially relate to this, that have been listening to us since the Phoenix FM days, every single week for X amount of years, people feel like they know us. So they feel like we're their mates because they know our voices, they know the stories, they know our history. We're very open people, so we tell personal stories, some sad, some funny. We've had tears, we've had laughter. And I think the people that are listening to you feel like they know you. And when they introduce themselves to you, we get that and we value that. And that's the key. On a much different level, let's just take an example, right? So Justin Bieber, for example, will sell millions and millions and millions of records, right? Ridiculously successful. And then you'll see a clip of him walking past some fans and someone will say, Justin, can I get a selfie, or can you quickly sign this? He won't even look at them. He'll just walk past them. And I think, you fucking prick, like, these people have put you where you are now, and you're so soulless that you can't even stop for a chat or a selfie. And, with us, these people have put us where we are, because without our patrons especially, we wouldn't have the life that we've got. And these are our people, because we've got a common bond, which is West Ham United, which is why I'll always try and help out West Ham fans. We needed our grass cut. So my wife put out an advert on Facebook asking if there's anyone with their own lawnmower that wants to do it. Well, there was a lot of replies. One person said, I'd love to do it, and I'll do it at a discount because I listen to the podcast. So he got the job. Our drive, we had 3 quotes for our drive. I gave it to the West Ham fans out of the 3. So there is a need for us to always look after the people that have looked after us, and the fact that I think we're grounded and we're very proud of the community that we created, because that is very, very important to us, as you alluded to earlier. So I think that in a is the essence, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I've since becoming a bit more involved with what you guys from on the event side of things. So I've gotten to get to know Michael Levy Jr., who I've had on the podcast,
Yeah, top
and
man.
he's such a nice guy and
Talented as well.
unbelievably talented, incredible story. I know you don't listen to many podcasts, but I really recommend you listen to the one I did with him because
Yeah.
his story is just fascinating.
Mm,
And I just kind of was asking questions and then just literally sitting back and just listening to the story because I just was enthralled
mm,
with it. But
mm.
people like that, and of course there's someone I've gotten to know a little bit with through the events, another patron, Stuart Kipling,
Yeah.
who's a regular on the show, getting to know you and X better, getting to know Martin Allen a little bit through the events,
Yeah.
and Steph and Gemma who do the raffle tickets at the events. The not only that, the whole community of people who are at the events is just a small representation of all the people who listen to the podcast on Patreon.
Mm,
It's an incredible thing to I feel as a fan of the club and of the West Ham way to be able
yeah.
to come along and be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. And what value you bring as well. It's not a case of you just said, I play the guitar and I'd like to contribute somehow. You are talented in your own right as well. You're very talented. We love the fact that you sort of set the mood when people are coming in and you're there by rights.
Thank
But
you.
obviously the fact that we listened to the email in the first place and gave it some thought initially was because you were one of us and you was a West Ham fan. And then when we realised your talent, we were just so thankful that you're part of it. So it's great. We're very proud of the community that we created. And we think that unlike certain pockets of the West Ham community, we have a lot of unity at the West Ham way. And that's what it's all about because we're all there for the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely an off-air discussion, eh?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, he's fantastic, and sort of onto the events, the organisation of that. Now, I've organised events, I've organised ticketed gigs, album launches, I've done stuff for other people I've promoted, and I've not played myself, so I've got some understanding of what that's like, and I think anyone listening to this on the music side of thing will also, relate to this. How do you go about that? Because you used the Colour Factory, a nightclub in Hackney Wick, and you used other venues before. And with the Colour Factory, it is a nightclub, and being there at sort of 10 in the morning feels a bit weird sometimes, but you still pack it out and make
Yeah.
that work. And the staff have been great. The everyone working it, the guests you've have been fantastic. Martin's always on form. How does that all come together?
Well, again, I think it comes down to the concept of what would we want as a West Ham fan? Before a game, if you're one of those that want to make a day of it rather than just turn up at your seat, then this is for you, in my opinion. And we started it, I think, about 8 years ago now. We've done well over 100 events now. And it started off at the East End Working Man's Club, and it was, some comical stories from that time. And then it moved to O'Neill's, and then it moved to Hackney Wick, the Colour Factory, like you say, a nightclub. And again, it really stems just from the community that we created in terms of how we got it off the ground. Because we thought, right, so we've got so many people that listen to the podcast. The people that listen to the podcast, we think like us or tolerate us, which is why they listen. They love West Ham. They love West Ham, which is why they listen. And what West Ham fan doesn't love ex-players? And what West Ham fan doesn't like a beer? So we just pieced everything together, and it was me that had to heavily convince X to get involved. He was quite skeptical at the time, but I said to him, mate, I really do think this could work. And going back to the East End Working Man's Club days when we first started, it was on the back of leaving Upton Park to go to the London Stadium, and at that time, a lot of West Ham fans were still pining for Upton Park. So we thought, why not keep one of the institutions alive for as long as we possibly could until it gets knocked down or shut down like they all have around now, and put on an event that people love. And then when it's done, we put them all on a coach and take them to the London Stadium for the game. And it just worked really, really well. And of course, X has got a massive following on Twitter. I've got a bit of a following. So we had a ready-made marketing reach to tell people about this. We had our own show that we could verbally promote the show and the events with. So we did it. And I remember the first time we did it, I think our first ever guest was Frank McAvenny, was it? Possibly. I think it was Frank McAvenny, hosted by Mark Wald. And no one could believe it. There was about 200 people that had turned up to the first ever one. I remember the governor of the East End Working Man's Club, Pete Bell, he come up to me and said, fucking hell, Dave, I think you created a monster here. And and then the second event we did, was Alvin Martin, which was similar numbers, but not as much, but really enjoyable. Then for some reason, the third event we did was Stuart Slater, and it was about fucking 30 people turned up. There was like tumbleweed in there. So it's the highs and lows of events and making profits
Yeah.
and loss and all that kind of stuff. But we just, I think we just intricately looked at all of the details as to what we needed, what needed to be in place, how we was going to go about it, what would be enjoyable, the timings of everything to give people the best start to their day. And it just carried through, and it's been a success ever since. So much so that we took it to American fans in Las Vegas. So we've done two of these shows, the same concept in Las Vegas, which were really good. We've done two shows in Australia last year, which were really good. And we're doing Sweden in November for Swedish fans, and the tickets for that are going like hotcakes already. And we really haven't promoted it that much. So the events, again, are something we're really proud of. And in terms of community, I love the events because you can actually put faces to names and you can have a conversation rather than just see names in black and white and swap messages. So it's taking the community element of it to the next level, which is brilliant. Something we're really proud of.
Yeah, I mean, of the first thing I had like that from your events. Remember, it was I was setting up and I looked over and my brother was having a chat with X, and when my brother's daughter was born,
Yeah.
I put in the comments asking if you'd sort of do a little congratulations for him and that, and you and X did. And shortly after that, my brother texted in a question about when's West Ham ever got you into trouble? And Dan said that his missus is in labour. He stood there holding her hand, and it pings up on his smartwatch that we went 1-0 down. And he forgot where he was. Went, oh, for fuck's sake! And the nurse had just given him like absolute evil. And he sent that story in, and he was saying, oh, he was asking X if he remembered it. I think he vaguely did, but of course you get God knows how many hundreds of comments a year you get that you read out, let alone the ones that you can't read out. Because there's any of them. And I remember just looking over and hearing that. And another time, my dad's a huge Tony Cottee fan, and my dad looks a bit like Tony Cottee, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does actually.
Yeah. And seeing him like just chatting for like a good 20 minutes, just getting on like a house on fire, and just being like, this is unbelievable.
Special, isn't it?
It really is. There was a bit where Dad said to Tony, "Oh, I get told I look like you," and Tony went, "I'm fucking taller than you, mate." And it's not hard, is it? My dad's 5'6".
But do you know what though, Chaz? Do you know what? I mean, I think there's a real crossover here, regardless of the event you do, right? Whether it's football related, basketball related, quiz show related, or music related. I think the crossover and the common bond is the unity of people that are coming together for a good time. And that is it. And I think in the world we live in, the fucked up world we live in, and the sometimes horrible society we live in, it's such a relief and an escapism to go to one venue and smile at people and make friends with strangers and be there for the same reason, whether you're there to dance, whether you're there to laugh, but whether you're there to do both. It brings people together. And we talk about community quite a lot in this show. And I think it's important because it radiates, it sort of resonates with everyone in terms of the common goal that we all have, which is to make people happy in what at times can be a really dark world.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of wanting to get onto the events and the podcast as well, because I think regardless of whether you're into football or West Ham fan or not, there's some real takeaways from what we're speaking about that people apply to their own podcast, their own fan communities, their own events, and it's there's something there to relate to for everyone, and it's not so, and to the point where I can't thank you guys enough for having me be involved. I've managed to get a lot of work. When I message people about match day music through the Euros, when I tell them that I've worked with you guys, it's always a bit of a deal breaker for them. Like, oh wow, yeah, great, how to work a football crowd kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's been great for me, and I've had it. I've been walking from the bar to my seat in the ground with Dad, and people have been at the events recognizing me, coming up to me, and I'm like,
that's brilliant.
Wow, this is weird,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, this is so nuts. Like, I get in Crawley occasionally. Like, oh, I see you playing the pub the other night. That sort of thing. You expect, having it at one of the world's biggest sports stadiums, it's a little bit freaky,
Well, you never know, Chaz. One day you might be playing in that stadium yourself, and everyone there will be there to see you. on
Yeah,
it?
we're all on the concourse. That's
Yeah.
something I'd written
Yeah.
down for that. But I don't
Yeah.
know who to get in touch with. I've spoken to X, I've spoken to Russ, DJ Russ, about it, about seeing who to speak to about playing on that concourse for the Heineken bar and that. But no one
Yeah.
seems to know. I don't, I don't know who
I've
to
got
speak
one.
to.
I've got one person in mind, which I'll,
Okay.
I'll talk to you about off air
Yeah,
that you
lovely.
haven't
Thank you.
you haven't mentioned there. But yeah, remind me. I'll speak to you about that.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Dave. Cheers. Well, I definitely will do. And just before I let you go, for the rest of the afternoon, you mentioned about you had to kind of convince your partner X to take up the events, whereas what's kind of ironic there is he had to convince you to get involved with the original concept of the radio show.
He did. Yeah, it's true.
And how sort of, your working relationship with X. So for people who don't know X, XWHU Employee on Twitter, he is the go-to ITK for West Ham. It's quite
Yeah.
fascinating what he does, and the contacts he has, and the contributions he makes to the to what you guys do overall,
Mm.
and the partnership you've got in particular is just fantastic. So worked with each other this closely for 8 years and build what you've built. So how did that come about? How did you two meet? How does your working dynamic work on? Is there a certain case of, right, you do this bit, I'll do that bit, or is it a bit more free flowing than that? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think some of it was organic. I think there is structure behind what we do, and I think we've got certain qualities and certain, positives and negatives to both of our personalities, which at times counteract each other in a positive way, ultimately, which has led to whatever success we've had. But yeah, at the time, and we are going back to probably 2015, I'm guessing. Um, I was running an online fanzine, West Ham related fanzine called Sex, Drugs and Colton Cole. And I think what really got us noticed more than anything else was we were friends with a professional camera crew. Sounds a bit heavy, but they were in the game and they had really expensive equipment and this sort of stuff. And they were West Ham fans as well. And we started to reach out to ex-players to interview them. And even now, I look back and it's a really high level of professionalism with these interviews. Now, we ask the questions, but we're not actually heard. The question itself comes up in text, followed by their video answer of it. And
Hmm.
it's really well put together. And we did quite a lot of them, about 10, I think. They're still on YouTube now. And at the time, X, who I didn't know or even had heard of actually at the time, because I wasn't really on social media that much, despite having an online fanzine on Facebook. He was about to launch the West Ham Way website. And as part of this, he wanted to reach out to Sex, Drugs and Colton Cole to see if he could use some of our videos. So I was a little bit skeptical at the time for whatever reason, but we met up with him in Queen's pub on Green Street.
Yeah, wipe your feet on the way out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. One of them, exactly that. And we met and we just hit it off. We got on really well. And then we met again, got on even better. And it's funny because we're both from different backgrounds, similar areas, but different backgrounds, different upbringings. But I think that's what makes it tick, really. And the longer it went on, the more we really did start to become close friends. And around that time, Phoenix FM got in touch with X, not me. They had no idea who I was. They got in touch with X and said, like, we love what you do. Is there any way you can make a radio show of it? And he said, well, yeah, I can, but I don't think I'll be able to host it. I need someone to do that job for me. And I think I know who would be the man to do it. So he asked me, and I said, to be honest with you, mate, I can't really be asked with that. So he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's not really my cup of tea. So about a few days later, he asked me again. I said, no, it's not for me. He said, well, look, what about bi-weekly? So not every week, but bi-weekly. And I said, nah, I don't think so. So he asked me again. He asked me about 5 times and he said, look, what about monthly? And do you know what? There was a part of me that thought, oh, fuck it. Let's just do it. If I don't like it, I can walk away from it. So I said, okay, look, I'll have a crack at it. We'll do it. We'll do it every week and give it a go. Because to be honest with you, Chaz, I had no idea, genuinely no idea that it would be as successful as it was from day one. Because what podcasters like yourself don't have is an instant massive platform from show one. But we had that because of X, because everyone that followed him wanted to know what he sounded like. They wanted to hear the updates from him verbally. They wanted to hear a new West Ham show on the block. So from episode one, we had like 50,000 listeners. So it was crazy.
Unbelievable.
And I had no idea what I was walking into. If I had have known that, and what the future could have become on the back of it, I'd have bitten his hand off the first time he asked me, and I'd have
Mm.
felt overwhelmingly privileged to have been asked. But I didn't know, and it was probably a bit of laziness creeping in there. And I thought, if this ain't going to go anywhere, then why bother? But thank God I did, because if I didn't, my life would have looked a lot different now. That's for sure. And it just blew up from day one, and we made a real success of it to a point where it's now become our living, and we're very proud of it. And then during that journey, the events came about. I was speaking to an ex-player one day, and he said, "Look, since I got released from prison, he said I can't get any work. I'd love to get back into the hospitality side of things." And I was chatting to him, thinking, "What sort of thing are you thinking?" He said, "I don't know, really." He said, "I know Everton do something." He said they rent a pub and they go to Morrison's and they pick up like cases of beer and stick it on the table and charge everyone 20 quid to get in, and they'll sometimes drag an ex-player in for a quick meet and greet or whatever. And I think that conversation planted the seed in me to then ultimately turn into what I believe was a beautiful flower. Because I said, "Look, leave it with me. I think I can make this work." Because he had this conversation with a couple of other people, but they couldn't get it off the ground. So I went to X and explained it to him, and I give it some thought as well. I really had some structure behind it. And he said, "No, I don't think it will work." I said, "Why not?" He said, "I don't know. I spoke to the family about it and they're dubious." I said, "X, look, trust me. I really think this will work, and this is why it's going to work." And then I even put together a PowerPoint presentation that I presented to the East End
Really?
Working Man's Club. Yeah, it was proper. I went to the East End
Wow.
Working Man's Club, and it was centered around the fact that they were inevitably going to close anyway. They'd lost their match day revenue. I said, I don't know how many pages it was, but I presented this PowerPoint presentation and said, "I think you need this, and I think we need this, and I think we could create something beautiful together. And if it don't work, we'll walk away and we'll shake hands. But if it does, it's money in your pocket, and it's hopefully money in ours." And that was that. So, and all throughout the journey, me and X have just created so many incredible memories together. And at the core of our relationship is humour. We laugh all the time on and off air, and we respect each other. And I think we've got creative abilities as well. And I just think it makes a really good partnership. And I think on air, one of the things people like is that we're very open, we're very honest, we put our hearts on the line, we don't mind laughing at ourselves. And I think people relate to us as mates that they have down the pub and have similar conversations with, just without a microphone between them. So I think that's the
Yeah.
core fundamentals of everything we've achieved so far, really. But we're very close friends, and that is the core of everything we're about, really.
That's fantastic. And again, sort of where I want to dive into that, I think that's when you've got any partnership with somebody that's a working creative partnership, whether that's a DJ and MC, a duo as a band, or even for my big example of that outside of the band is, for example, the producers I've worked with, and having that friendship and that trust, and the ability to have a laugh with each other just makes things work so well. The conversation I had on a couple of weeks ago, lad I had on was actually my former producer when I was in bands, and we're
Mm.
still really good mates now. He was a groomsman at my wedding, and that working what you were saying there, the way you were talking about the way you and X worked together, really actually made me reminisce about my time working with him. So it makes
Yeah,
it makes a
it
lot of sense.
does.
You've got to have that working relationship with each other. It has to just work, doesn't it?
Well, I think you've got to have the working relationship, but you've got to have the personal relationship as
Exactly.
well. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm godfather to his son. I think if I'd have got married when I knew him, I think he'd be my best man. And we're very close. You'd have to like each other to fucking put up with how much we speak to each other. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure I drive him mad at times and he drives me mad, but we do love each other. And I think the good thing about that is if you've got that personal connection as well as that working connection, it's got longevity to it. I mean, if you look at, say, the specials, they were an iconic part of the ska scene for 4
Mm.
years,
Yeah.
but then they ended up hating each other in the fourth year. So they
Yeah.
disbanded. And then they had a reunion many, many years later. Oasis, look how many years we've lost on them
Yeah.
because they fell out and couldn't get on. And they're having a reunion again, granted. But if you look at likes of the Rolling Stones, they're still gigging to this day. Have never stopped.
No,
Bad Manners.
absolutely.
There are so many.
Yeah.
So, hopefully it's got longevity as well. And like I said to you earlier on, Chaz, as long as people are happy with what we're doing, then we'll carry on. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and this is what's so great about it. People are so happy with it. People do get so much out of it, and there's just I think people will just keep I mean, as long as you do keep doing it as well. And interesting what you said there about Oasis. I heard something today. It was on Radio X. They were split up to the day for as long as they were together as a band.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
15 years, 4 months, and 12 days, so something like that. I pulled that figure out of nowhere, but that was the amount of time they were away for, which is pretty nuts.
I can't see how it's going to work, Chaz, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm sure they won't want to let anyone down, but it seems to me like those brothers can't stay in a room with each other for longer than 10 minutes.
I don't
They're
think they
both
will.
egomaniacs, and they've
Yeah,
got, what is it, 12 nights booked?
something
I
like that, and
can't,
there'll be
they'll
more.
fall
There'll
out
be
again
more.
after the first night.
I reckon what'll happen is they'll do some very both of those brothers have been playing those songs since most of those songs. There won't be that much rehearsal because they'll both still be pretty fresh now know how to play them, most of them. And I think they will walk on stage, they'll do their bit, they'll walk off, and they'll probably have separate dressing rooms. And it'll be a bit like yeah, I'll tell you what is an example. You know Sam and Dave, isn't they did Soul Man?
Yeah, love them.
Do you know the story about why they never spoke?
No?
They were. I was told this by a teacher at my college. They were at. I don't know what the circumstances were, but they're American, so obviously there was guns around, and either Sam or Dave accidentally shot the other one's wife, and she
No,
lived.
you're
She lived. No,
joking.
no, she lived. I'm telling you what. I'm gonna make sure I'm getting the facts right here because I was told this story 15 years ago or so. So I want to make sure I'm getting this right. But
Wow. What, not
uh,
dead?
no, no.
I can understand why he's got the ump, though, to be
Yeah,
fair.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But apparently used to walk on stage from opposite sides and then not speak to each other, sing, walk off, and then come back.
Wow.
Uh
It's amazing.
yeah, I really hope I've not made myself like an idiot there here. Because I remember being told this, but yeah, there was something to have a look. Oh, okay, no. I think what it was is Dave accidentally shot his own wife, and Sam didn't want to speak to him after that, but they carried on working together to earn a coin, basically.
Plot twist.
Yeah, plot twist. Yeah, so yeah, it
Wow.
wasn't his own. Oh, if it's not his own wife, what's she so upset about? Eh, you know,
Yeah,
she's
well,
got
that's
the
what I
ump
was
about.
thinking, to be honest.
Up tough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Bloody hell.
Yeah, it's
That's
funny.
amazing.
It's funny with the specials you say that because when they did come back, the bass player Horace Panter came into. I went to music college. He came in for like they used to do these Q&A masterclass things, and they were amazing. Dave, we had Roger Daltrey, we had Paul Weller, we had Beverly
Wow.
Knight, we had Madness.
Bloody hell.
Before I joined, they had Jeff Beck. They had all of these people in that were just unbelievable, and I got to see some really good ones. And one day, Horace Panter came in, and I'll be honest, he was an arrogant bastard. It
Was
wasn't the
he?
best. Yeah, it wasn't the best one I've been to. Still interested, and somebody asked him, said, "What's it like? What's it like now? Kind of working with Terry again? Has that affected your friendship at all?" And he laughed and went, "You should have asked me that," and then moved on to the next question.
Oh, what a prick. See, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly the sort of example I'm talking. Why go to something like that if you're going to behave in that way? Do
I
you know
know.
what I mean?
I know, but when we walked out, it was a bloke who stood next to me. He was like, "I'm really fucking glad I put him on the spot now. Really pleased
Yeah.
I did."
Yeah. That's a shame that. I almost
It
wish
is
you
a
wouldn't have
shame.
said that because I love the specials. And I went to
I
their
do.
30th anniversary at Brixton Academy, I think it was.
Oh
And
wow.
oh, it was amazing. Their reunion tour. Yeah, it was superb. But yeah, no, that's disappointing about him, isn't it? But I don't
Yeah,
know. There you
best
go.
ass by them things. If you're into that sort of music, if you listen to any of that band Death of Guitar Pop,
Do you know what, mate? I still haven't.
oh
You've
mate,
shouted that before, and that's I still. You must remind me, send me another link because
I
that just
will.
disappeared into
Well,
my
they
the
did a song
sphere
with
of my
Neville
brain. But
Staples, so that's
oh,
what's from what
really?
yeah, they did Suburban Scar Club, and with Neville
Wow.
Staples. Funnily enough, they did a bit of a because you know they're one of them typical sort of ska bands. They don't mind having a bit of a pop at themselves and having a laugh. They did a song with Tom Skinner called Bosch.
Yes. Oh, it's them.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I've
them.
seen that. I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah,
that.
yeah. But yeah, really good band, really good. If you like the specials, you should definitely check them out. But
Right.
yeah, well, I think on that note, mate, I'd best let you go and enjoy the rest of this lovely afternoon.
Brilliant. Well, look, I want to say thanks for having me on, Chaz. I really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that's come across all
Absolutely,
right. And
yes,
wish you all the
definitely.
best of luck in your endeavours, mate.
Thanks, mate, and I will see you probably at the Villa game. at this point. Is it the? No, it's not the Villa game. It's the
Ipswich.
Ipswich. That's right. It was going to be Villa, wasn't it?
That's the one.
Confused. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I will see you there.
Top man.
Brilliant. Cheers, Dave. You've been listening to the Bandwagon Podcast with me, Charlie Cooper. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Bandwagon Pod, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music and Amazon Music to keep up with future shows.